What's up, BookTube? It's Monty. Today I'm here to do a review of History Is All You Left Me by Mr. Adam Silvera. I'm going to do a short, probably like really short, a couple minute synopsis on the book, my general thoughts, and then I'm going to move on to spoilers. When I do move on to spoilers over here somewhere, I don't know, there'll be a spoiler thing. You'll know when I get to the spoilers. It won't be a mystery. So this story is of Griffin, and he is mourning his boyfriend Theo, who has died. Technically at this point they're ex-boyfriends, but Griffin is still very attached to Theo. So we're dealing with that, and it tells the story in some chapters moving away from Theo's death and Griffin processing that with the help of Theo's new boyfriend, Jackson. And the story is also told building up to the death from, again, still Griffin's perspective, but we have bits with Theo and their other friend Wade and their lives leading up to when Theo died. We don't really get a scene in the book where Theo dies, but we do, over the course of the novel, discover how that happened and the sort of circumstances surrounding that. Overall, I feel like there's a lot to not like about this book, if I'm being honest. And I don't think that this is the right place to start. I don't really agree with any of the blurbs on this. I feel like these blurbs are very generous because I felt like over the course of the novel, it didn't click. Like the book wasn't coming together the way I think it wanted to come together. It worked for me in the end after I sat down and I processed everything and I stopped comparing it to other books by Adam Silvera, namely They Both Die at the End. Once I divorced trying to compare this to the other works and processing the story for what it was trying to do, for what it was aiming to do, I came to decide that I did like it. I came to that conclusion that I did enjoy the story, I did enjoy the characters, although I had a lot of problems. All the problems I had are spoilery, but I do think there is a dynamic in this that is entirely unhealthy. And not just because there's an age gap, because as a person, I'm not entirely opposed to them. I read Call Me By Your Name, which has a vast age gap. But I felt that that story worked. I thought that that narrative clicked, and it worked for me. Whereas this book has a much smaller age gap, but I felt that it was just, it didn't click. It didn't work for me. I wasn't invested in that relationship. In fact, I was probably invested against that, because I could see that it was going in this direction from pretty early on. Like the first 100 or so pages, I could see this is where part of the narrative was going to go. And I wasn't invested in it, and I don't think at any point did Mr. Silvera get me on board with it. And so it didn't work. It didn't work, and I thought it was just negligent. And so it really made me hate the character, and I hate that aspect of the book. But I also think that this is a book that isn't light. I do think that this book operates on a little bit of like a multitude of levels. I do plan on at some point purchasing this book again because I would like to reread it and like to mark it up, which I obviously can't do with a library copy. So those are my brief spoiler-free thoughts. I do recommend it, but I would recommend going in knowing that there's a lot to not like. It is kind of slow. There isn't much of a plot. This is definitely a very character-driven novel. So just know that if you're not looking forward to like an examination of like the grieving process and examinations of like your own mortality, this probably isn't for you, and I think it's okay. That said, spoilers. I hate Jackson. I thought that Jackson was the worst character simply because he was an adult. I know that this is a YA novel, but Jackson was written to be 18, so he was an adult. He turns 19 over the course of the story, which is fine. I believe that Theo was around his same age. I believe it stated that Theo was like a year or so older than Griffin, so their relationship was fine. But when we get Griffin and Jackson sort of bonding after Theo's death and grieving together and processing that together, none of that felt okay. It never felt like it was... It had this like creepy factor to it that it never quite shook as far as I was concerned. It always felt that it was like wrong and just didn't need to happen. Because it felt like you could see the groundwork being laid for a more romantic relationship. So I didn't like that. And I thought that at some point I could have got on board. At some moments it was fine, like when they're having dinner and like Griffin's parents were like being kind of cold or whatever. I appreciated that. I think what really made me despise Jackson as a character was when he helped Griffin run away to California. That to me was a little bit unforgivable just because Griffin was a minor, and I was like, that's no. Like, you don't do that. Like, you're an adult. Like, you are an adult, and you grieving and wanting to bond with this person, I don't think excuses that. So I didn't care that Jackson then tried to teach him how to drive, and they had these cute moments where they talked about what happened when Theo died. Like, none of that mattered to me because I was livid. I was absolutely livid that Jackson didn't see anything wrong with helping Griffin get to California against his parents' express permission. Like, at that point, especially because Griffin's parents were such an important part of the narrative. Like, they were people in the story that I cared about. So if this is like a YA novel where the parents weren't around or whatever, like, I probably would have been okay with it. I probably would have been able to find a way to collect myself and just experience the story for it being the story. But because they were like the parents were an important part of the story, I didn't like that. It bothered me a great deal. And then when Griffin and Jackson had sex, that whole scene, I'll try to include a picture. I took a picture, I believe, of the moment, and that shit was just crazy. That shit was fucking crazy. Like, no. The whole, like, that one specific moment, just no. I'll try to include a picture. It was just no. And I think what really got me was apparently Wade and in Griffin's magical romance that came out of fucking nowhere. I didn't like that either. I didn't like that. I thought how it ended was cute. I thought them ending together was cute. I thought Griffin getting treatment at the end was cute. I mean, he had seen the therapist towards the middle of the book as well, but the continuation of his him getting help for his mental illness, I thought was really great. That just wasn't forgotten. Like, they continued along. Like, I thought that was really great. But the whole Wade Griffin relationship just came out of nowhere for me. It didn't work. And I also don't think that the examination of grief and the grieving process worked here. Because I think that Jackson and that bond with Griffin was it's the real focus of the book. And for most of it, I was actively against it. And I wish that and I understand that the point of the narrative is that we don't get Theo's perspective. But I do find myself really wanting it. But at the end of the day, I did enjoy it overall, despite its flaws. Despite its many flaws that left me livid and upset, I think that it worked because it did make me think, and it did make me want to go back to the narrative and digest it from the beginning to analyze the text. And for that, I'm grateful. For that, I am grateful. So I think that's all I really have to say. I feel like this book sparks the most discussion, and I do appreciate that as well. So if you have read History Is All You Left Me, make sure you leave comments down in the comment section so we can have that discussion, because I do want to have it. And I guess we're just going to end that here. So I'll see you again in my next video, whenever that happens to be. But until then, bye.